Hi, I will start with 3 fun facts, and some of them might be real and some of them I just made up. You try to guess which one is which, and I will disclaim it at the end of the video. First one, you have more microbacteria in your gut than you have cells in your body. Second one, fecal transplant is a procedure where you literally eat feces of other human. Third one, gut bacteria are so unique from person to person that it can be used in forensics instead of fingerprints or DNA to track criminals. Now let's go to the serious stuff. We have approximately 4 kilos of microbiome, the bacteria in our gut. That will differ from person to person depending on the size. And that bacteria is not just hanging out there, it's communicating. It's communicating with our brain and we can communicate back. Or I should say, we should communicate back, we should communicate first, and I'm not being by far as overdramatic as I could be. You will see why. My name is Paolo and today I will explain you everything you need to know about gut flora, our microbiome. What is it doing to you? How can we make it to work for us so we don't become some kind of venom? People generally know that we have the gut, we have the microbiome. And some people even know that eating certain food helps to build this bacteria. But there is a lot more into it because these bacteria colonies, yes, they live in colonies, are kind of telling us what to think. And we should be aware. Because if we are not paying attention, we can build problems, mood swings, or specific certain types of thoughts. But with that, I would be getting ahead of myself. There is a lot going on in the gut. The bacteria are not only helping the digestion. For example, they are creating neurotransmitters, serotonin. 90% of the production for the whole body is created in the gut. They also have signaling pathways to immune system and they are helping to fight inflammation. Gut is connected directly to the brain through dorsal part of vagus nerve. There is more neural connections in the gut than there is neural connections in a whole spinal cord. Gut is called second brain for a reason. As this connection is very intriguing, there was a couple of very interesting studies done with mind-blowing results. For example, autistic people who got their microbiome transplanted from healthy people were changing their behavior, and it was basically decreasing the severity and frequency of their symptoms. So their behavior literally changed. That is a strong demonstration how strong the impact of this microbiome is to our behavior and brain. And here is the thing, the impact is strong and there is a lot of colonies. The diversity is good, we want that, we need the diversity for our health. But that's also the tricky part because these colonies, they don't act the same. Different colonies respond different ways to different food. Some of them are more fed by protein, some of them are more feeding on carbs, and the ones you will be feeding momentarily will be sending the strongest signal to the brain. Eating carbs is sending different signal than eating protein. So what if you eat them together? Well, that's the tricky part. It can be individual, but everybody has some tolerance threshold, and if you go past that, it will send a mixed signal. You know that feeling when you have chicken with rice or steak with potatoes and afterwards you kind of feel like crashing, but at the same time your head is restless and you kind of have a brain fog. You really feel just like lying down, but it's all a bit chaotic. That is what mixed signals looks like. In general, carbs are more for activation, activity, alertness. They trigger more of that sympathetic activity. Protein signals parasympathetic, so more towards resting, digesting, and chill. Fats in general are more neutral, but if it's animal fats, that they are naturally a little bit more towards that protein parasympathetic side, mainly because it's really hard to get just pure fat without any protein. And when you think about it, there is not a single natural food that would contain carbs and protein at the same time. Vegetable, as it has a lot of fiber, it is actually feeding these bacteria, but from the signal perspective, it's not really pushing you to either side. That is also why if you have that steak or some meat or fish with only vegetable instead of the potatoes, it is less likely to give you this after meal crash. Fruit or carbs, and there will be definitely more on that sympathetic activity side. However, starches, so complex carbs, are very specific in one way. They behave differently depending on how you eat them. If we take rice, if you eat it fresh, as it was cooked, still hot, it's fairly easy to digest. The carbs are transferred into glucose fairly fast, and it leads to a pretty strong spike in blood sugar and therefore spike in insulin. However, if this rice is cooked and then it's cooled down, and then before eating it can be reheated, but the point is that it was cooled down, these starches change their structure. Some of that turns into resistant starch. It is harder to digest and it acts more like a fiber. The sugar and insulin spikes are lower, and the gut microbiome, it actually loves it because you cannot digest this starch, but the microbiome is feeding of it. And that potentially is also supporting and nourishing and increasing the diversity of the microbiome. So what does all this means practically? Does it mean that you should never have steak with the potatoes or toast with egg or pasta with the meatballs? Well, it depends, because there is a lot of tiny nuances. First of all, the main rule: avoid processed food. Processed food absolutely negatively impacts the gut biome. It can decrease the diversity and literally is wiping the colonies off. There was a researcher who paid his own son to go for 10 days on McDonald's only diet. In those 10 days, the diversity of the boy's gut flora dropped by 40%. There is also one other thing that is completely wrecking the gut biome, and that is antibiotics. So if you can avoid them, always have them only as the last resort. As I said before, for gut microbiome, the diversity is the key. We can use certain foods to build the diversity. For example, already mentioned resistant starches or fermented food like sauerkraut, kimchi, kombucha. These all are helping and supporting the life, and they nourish the bacteria in your gut. However, you should also have diversity of these sources. Same type of fermented food or the same brand of kombucha or whatever you're doing is going to lead to supporting the same type of bacteria. But because the diversity is important, also that diversity in food is very important. Regarding the combinations of carbs and protein, the best thing is to do what works for you. We first need to understand that also types of protein will have different impact. For example, beef steak sits in your gut for way longer time than whey protein. So signal-wise, when we talk about the signal to the brain, having steak with potatoes is going to be very different than having whey protein milkshake with banana. Even without much science behind it, intuitively we know that having chicken and rice is a different amount, ratio and combination of protein and carbs than if you have yogurt bowl, which also has some protein, with fruit, which also has some carbs. At the same time, the amount will make massive difference as well. If you have the chicken breast with 2 spoons of rice, it is not going to create such a strong mix of the signals than if you have 300 grams of the rice with that chicken breast. So how to make this all to make sense? Remember, the core is that the gut is sending signal to your brain. So start reading the signal. How you feel 2 to 3 hours after a meal is your reference point. Generally, try to eat for what is coming. If I know I'm going to have training, well, that's very logical. I'm not going to have 400-gram steak 1 hour before that. But if I know for the rest of the day I'll be just chilling and not doing much, I can have that steak. At the same time, having carb bomb right before going to bed is not the best idea. If you are about to be active, have some carbs. If you are about to be resting, have some protein. For a long-term strategy, if you want to take this seriously, is to start very strict and then learning on yourself. Key starting point will be to clear that signal. So for first 2 to 3 weeks, completely separate proteins from carbs. If you can't imagine having your meat without a side dish, just have vegetable. Try to eliminate the combinations at first and then slowly start to experiment. Because if you do it properly, you will have very clear signals to your brain after every meal. And then when you do some kind of combination, it will be very fast and very easy to recognize that something's not right. You will notice if that particular combo or amount is taking that clarity and sharpness from you. It is a journey. It is not easy. It's going to take time, and you are only going to learn by trying and messing up. And that is how proper learning works anyway. So remember, carbs are fuel for activity, protein is for recovery and peace. Test yourself and see how you react and learn on yourself. This is one rare case when you can't learn on other people's mistakes. Unless you want to go full in and separate these two macronutrients as much as possible for good. Thank you for watching. My name is Paolo. Send this video to 2 people. First one, somebody who is always complaining that they are tired. And second, somebody who really needs to talk to their bacteria and get their mood swings under control. And regarding the 3 fun facts, yes, you indeed have more microbacteria in your gut than you have cells in your body. It's approximately 1.3 times more in a count of 100 trillion of bacteria. Second fact, yes, fecal transplant is a legit method. It is usually done by colonoscopy or rectal implants. However, it can also be done orally, where the microbiome is extracted from feces, diluted, and in form of frozen pills, but still. And for the third one, yes, gut bacteria is very unique to everybody individually, but because it shifts and transforms a lot, it cannot be used in forensics. Thank you very much for watching. If you have any comments or questions, please comment under the video or reach out directly to me. See you next time.